Good evening and welcome to the Louisville Literary Arts 2022-23 season of the InKY Reading Series. I am Charlize Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Louisville Literary Arts, and with us tonight we also have Irv Klein, who is President of the Board. Hey Irv, thank you for joining in and supporting. And tonight we have two very exciting readers. We have been chatting behind the scenes, and we are really looking forward to hearing what they will read tonight. So what I'm going to do is just remind everybody this is recorded, and it will be on YouTube in about 2 weeks or so. So you can send it out to all your friends, send them the link. And I will be admitting people into the room periodically as they come in. So some people will choose to show their faces and some people won't. So just be mindful that we are being recorded. Anything you do or anything you say, if you're not on mute, is going to be on there. All right. So let's get started with our very first reader. Dianne Aprile, wave to us. So I'm going to read her entire bio because, again, this is going to be on YouTube and people can watch it anytime. Dianne Aprile is the author of 4 books, including a collaboration with the late Louisville artist Julius Friedman, an anthology of text and fine art photographs titled The Book, and with Indiana printmaker Mary Lou Hess on The Eye Is Not Enough. With a special interest in the intersection of words and visual imagery, Dianne has also collaborated with visual artists on book projects, gallery shows, Zoom classes, and in-person workshops. After 13 years living in the Pacific Northwest, she and her husband, Ken Shapiro, is that right? Moved back to Louisville in spring 2022. She's the recipient of a Hedgebrook Women Writers Residency on Whidbey Island, a Washington State Artist Trust Fellowship, and was one of 12 Pacific Northwest writers selected in 2019 for Jack Straw Writers Program. She has received fellowships, grants, awards, and residencies from the Kentucky Foundation for Women, the Kentucky Arts Council, the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, the Society of Professional Journalists, and others. Her poetry and essays have appeared in anthologies, journals, and in newspapers, including an essay on living in Kirkland, Washington, the site of the first major outbreak of COVID-19 in the U.S. She was twice nominated for a Pushcart, both times with excerpts for her memoir in progress. During her 30-year career as a journalist, yay to the journalist, she was a Sunday columnist, an arts writer, reviewer, and part of the Courier Journal team that won a Staff Pulitzer Prize in 1989. Okay. She was also co-owner of a downtown Louisville jazz club with her husband for 5 years. Since its inception in 2001, Dianne has taught on the faculty of Spalding University's Naslin Mann School of Writing. Welcome, Dianne.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so she's going to read for about 20-25 minutes. So you all just settle in. Yeah. You ready?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's really great to be here because as Charlize just mentioned, I've been away for a long time. And this organization kind of grew up while I was away. So I'm really glad to be a part of it tonight. And I'm going to be reading some stories about my Aunt Aline. It's part of a memoir in progress. It's been in progress for a long time. I'm kind of glad to be back in Louisville where I can kind of revisit the places where she lived and where I really got to know her and love her. She has an interesting story, which will be revealed in the passages that I read here. And it's been interesting to me in the past few months, past 2 years, really, to think about how her story intersects with some big things that have happened in the news and in our lives and our culture. One is COVID, because she one of her challenges in life was having really extreme OCD, washing her hands, and she was afraid of germs. And I think part of it was because she was a little girl during the what they called the Spanish flu, the pandemic in 1918. I just have thought a lot about her during this whole time of washing our hands and being careful about germs. But also, she was the victim of a sexual assault and never told anybody about it. In fact, that's what triggered the OCD. So I think a lot about her, particularly when the whole Me Too movement kind of burst onto the scene. And so many people were talking about having been assaulted and never having said anything the rest of their lives about it. Helped me to understand her story and why she didn't talk about it. So I'll start with a longer piece, and then I have two really short pieces. The manuscript, the memoir, is a kind of a hybrid of some poetry, some found poetry, some prose. And this is prose piece. The Water Bearer. What they tell me about her. She's afraid of germs. She's silly. She washes her hands till they bleed. She sees things. She thinks something's there when it's not. She's a hothouse flower. She was overprotected. She needs to be taken care of. She's scrupulous. She worries. She believes everything's a sin. She thinks too much. She's afraid of her thoughts. She's afraid of storms. She's afraid of dogs. She's afraid of strangers, afraid of sin, afraid of germs, of dying, of death. She's afraid, 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 afraid. What I notice about her, she's fun. Not like my mother's other sisters, both married with their own daughters to pamper. She takes me with her to the beauty shop on Saturdays, where the stink of permanent solution comes to smell like perfume to me in my memories then and now. And the steady drone of bulky overhead hair dryers reminds me of engines revving in driveways on winter mornings up and down my suburban street. The beauty shop is actually a beauty school in a concrete block building, 6 steps up from Bardstown Road, a busy city street. It's a short walk from the house where she lives with her brother and their mother. And we make it even shorter by going out the back door, crossing the brick-paved alley, and cutting through the doorway of the Cherokee Inn. We hurry past the inn, the two of us trying to make ourselves small, knowing we are trespassers, defying the no cut-through order, hoping we can dodge the grumpy lady who runs the place. At the beauty school, I sit for hours, my legs dangling from a cushioned chair, listening and watching. She is happy here. She's laughing, she's telling a joke, she shakes her head the same way, at the same tempo as all the other women. She looks in the mirror held to the back of her head, checks out the curls, the color, the length. She says, I love it. She says, I didn't know I was so good looking. I'll get me a fella tonight. She laughs at herself, gets out her wallet, removes some bills, pays the woman who have washed and permed and combed and fluffed and sprayed her hair. They laugh too. You be good with that fella tonight, Aline, they call out as we leave through the door with the old wavy glass in the top. Next thing you know, we'll be getting you ready for your wedding. She wags her head at them and points to me. This one will be getting married before I do. I cringe at the attention, suddenly, for the first time all day, focused on me. I frown, but everyone laughs. It's all a joke. Going down the steps, trying to push her wallet back into her purse, she drops the $10 bill. It floats to the sidewalk, lands back, break your back. When I stoop to pick it up, she whispers, no, leave it there. It's dirty, she says. It's got germs on it. I think she's joking until I see the panic in her eyes. Okay, I won't touch it, I say. And we ignore the dirty, germ-laden, filthy piece of paper, act as if it isn't there, walk right past it. Ignorance is bliss. When we get to the corner, she looks up over the top of the bank building across the street, and I look up too to see what she's seeing. No clouds, blue sky, not a storm in sight. She lowers her eyes to meet mine. You want a sundae? How about a butterscotch at Walgreens? Now she's talking. We punch the button mounted on the telephone pole, eager for the light to change, to cross the street, to find our way to the back corner of Walgreens, to the red vinyl booths, to the seats by the windows, where we can have our Sundays and watch people go about their business, cashing checks, buying stamps, picking up dry cleaning. From our favorite booth in the back of Walgreens, we can also watch the sky, just in case. What I heard happened. How did I hear it? Through the furnace vents, the voices of my mother and father talking about the operation, disembodied details filtering upstairs to my bedroom? Or did I overhear my grandmother's side of a telephone conversation with one of her sons? Did my older brother clue me in? Was it something the family talked about that I knew they thought I didn't hear, wasn't supposed to know, couldn't possibly understand? She never got over it, and it wasn't anything, not really. She made a big deal out of it. It scared her. She was a hothouse flower. He didn't do anything. He didn't touch her, but she was afraid. It made her feel dirty. Her hands, filthy. She washed them, scrubbed them. She could go through 10 towels in a day. Her sister Laura noticed first. By then, the washing had been going on for 2 years, but no one knew. Laura noticed the wet towels thrown in the closet, heaped up whenever she visited, 10 in one day. He didn't do anything to her, only took her for a ride. It was a rainy day, stormy. She didn't want to go. She had a dress to return to Selman's. She was counting votes at the armory, a temporary job, something to do. Her friend said, "Why don't you go with him? He's a nice fella. My daughter dates him." There was a car. The lightning and thunder had let up, but it was raining cats and dogs. She had plans to go to Middletown to Laura's with her mother and brother. Her friend said, "Oh, you can take that dress back another day, can't you?" She got in the car, hugging the dress close to her body, keeping it dry, protecting it from the rain. He said, "Would you like a ride?" She said, "Oh, I can't." But she did. Nothing happened. No, nothing. He drove her past Waverly Hills, out Dixie Highway, past any place she'd ever been. He parked in front of a house where a man was picking chickens. A woman answered the door. "Come in," she said to the man. "Where's Joan today?" It was raining. Through a doorway, she saw a room with a jukebox, a dance floor, tables and chairs. "What'll you have?" She didn't know how to order drinks. She said, "Just a Coke highball?" She wondered if they were waiting for her back home, Mama in red, impatient, wanting to leave for Laura's. She was afraid they were angry, worried, afraid. It was her brother, Sam, who said she was a hothouse flower. My mother was the one who told me she was silly. Skip said it was just something she couldn't get out of her mind. I heard my grandmother say it was her nerves that were shot. That's why she wouldn't pick up a $10 bill that fell from her wallet to a sidewalk. That's why she used her elbows, not her hands, to push open doors. That's why they gave her the shock treatment and kept her for days, long stays in the hospital. And that's why she spent so much time in the bathroom with the water running, even though her hands weren't dirty, were in fact just washed a few minutes earlier. She herself told me much later, more than a half century after that day in the rain, that it was not something that happened that set her mind crazy, but something the woman said, the woman who let them into the house. She said, "There's no room downstairs, but there's plenty of beds upstairs." That was the beginning of everything, she told me. I said, "Get me out of here, get me out of here." On the way home in the rain, the man kept saying, "I don't know why you're so excited." And she kept repeating, "Get me home, I gotta get home." That's when all of it started, the fear, the dirty hands, the filthy world closing in on her, the urge to wash, to scrub, to cleanse, to erase, the heaps of wet towels. A secret for 2 years, too fearful to tell anyone what she was doing or why, not even a priest. Laura was the first to notice. "I'll tell Mama if you don't." So they told her together. Mama cried. "Why didn't you tell us?" They found her a doctor. They gave her shock treatments. They put her in hospitals. They prayed and listened and tried to talk sense to her. And finally, they signed her up for an operation. I can't remember when or how I heard about it. The word seems always to have been in my vocabulary. Long before the story of the ride in the rain, I knew how to say it, spell it, define it. 4 syllables, unaccented, like a Japanese word. No emphasis, just sounds strung together, like a line of chant, a prayer, a mantra, lobotomy. What I learned later, when she was 10, she was struck by a car on Barrett Avenue. She was with her cousin Ginny, walking home from a movie. I remember we bought candy when we came out of the show. She walked east on Broadway from the movie house, stopping to take a look at a creek that ran beside the street. What happened after that, she doesn't remember. The driver of the car The owner of Michael's shoe company stopped after he struck her, and she heard later that his girlfriend, a member of the family that owned the Sealback Hotel, got out of the car, knelt down on the pavement, and prayed the rosary. At the hospital, her skull fractured. She fell into a coma and lay unconscious overnight. They anointed me for death. She awoke to a priest praying by the radiator and standing next to him, her uncle by marriage, Charlie Leibson, a lawyer. She doesn't remember much else about her hospital stay other than it lasted 3 weeks. When she was 13, a freshman at Atherton High School, she came down with diphtheria. She was on her way home from her uncle's house where she had rehearsed a school play with friends, when she suddenly thought, I'm sick. When her father felt her fiery forehead in the middle of the night, he called a doctor who didn't show up till morning. The household, 12 persons strong at the time, was placed in quarantine. A sign on the door warned visitors away from the house. Mama had to put out a pail for the milkman. Her sisters and brothers, including my mother, who was in elementary school, could not attend classes until well after Christmas. I carried the germ till March. She herself missed the entire term, but went to summer school to catch up. When she was 22, her father died. Tony Bauman's ice and coal. He was 53. His heart gave out. He worked too hard. He started his business with a quarter. He had a horse and cart and trucks and employees. The boys helped. Ice hooks slung over shoulders, delivering blocks of ice up flights of stairs, loads of coal to sellers, collecting payments or not. They feared his temper. He was kind but moody. He made candy at Christmas for family and friends and customers. The long hallway at home, lined with tables, delicately roped candy baskets, setting up on wax paper, chocolates cooling. He was a perfectionist. He worked too hard. He owned a saloon too, the Buckeye Tavern. In the only photograph of him that survived his death, he's standing behind the bar, small, dark, balding, brooding. Eventually, he turned over the saloon to the boys. Red worked there for a time, Sam too, Buck as well. They all like to drink, some too much. There's a division within the family as to whether Tony was one of the latter. But regarding some things about Tony, everyone agrees. For 2 years before he died, he lived in an oxygen tent. He couldn't breathe on his own. His lungs collapsed. His heart gave out. He died too soon. The day the man drove her to the house with the jukebox and beds, he asked her at some point about her father. She remembers this clearly. He's dead 1 month, she told him. It was a rainy day in September 1936, 4 months before the Great Ohio River flood, the January deluge that sent icy waters roaring across Louisville streets into its houses, overtaking entire neighborhoods, including one called Butchertown, home to the Buckeye Tavern, and a 3-story brick on the north side of Franklin Street, where the Bauman family lived. How I came to write her story. The mid-1970s, a corner of the newsroom, the 4th floor of the Courier-Journal and Louisville Times building, 525 West Broadway. A break between deadlines. Reporters leaning against desks, talking about their families. I mentioned my aunt, InKY, who washes her hands. Reporters, being reporters, ask lots of questions. I find myself thinking about her story in a way I've never done before. The conversation lasts until an editor's bark sends us back abruptly to our individual typewriters. All but one of us. This one sidles up to me, whispers in my ear, if you don't write about her, I will. Coincidentally, the Courier-Journal building was built in the 1950s by Struck Construction Company, the firm that employed InKY for 37 years until her retirement. Coincidental as well as the last name of the man who picked her up outside the armory on that rainy September day. Hand. H-A-N-D. In fact, this is why I have not tried, as so many have urged me, to render her story in fiction. Too many coincidences, too rich, too complex, too full of grace and amazement to pass for truth in fiction. Think of it, a moody, temperamental father whose job is delivering ice and coal. Too pat for a character in a novel. Or this, the way water runs, well, like a river, through the story of her life. Rain, creeks, faucets, floods, holy water. When I was growing up, my Uncle Red, her brother, habitually crooned the line of an old cowboy song. a hit in the 1940s by the Sons of the Pioneers. I can hear his exaggerated baritone rising up from his basement workroom or drifting from the backyard shed. The shadows sway and seem to say, tonight we pray for water, cool water. And way up there, he'll hear our prayer and show us where there's water, cool water. As a family, they lived a few blocks from the banks of the Ohio on a floodplain where they took for granted the elaborate geography and complex economy of that great river. Didn't think much about it until the winter of 1937, when the river overshot its banks and sent freezing waters up the stairway of the brick house, halfway to the second floor. The women escaped. The men stayed until they had to be rescued by Red Cross boats at the upstairs windows. Water, mesmerizing and dangerous, resurfacing at the scene of every crime. Water flowing through memories, blurring the lines of recollection and truth. So that sort of gives you some background for what the story's about. And then I'm gonna, if I still have time, I'm just gonna, thank you. Right, I'm gonna read you just a couple of quick poems. The first one I wrote. The second one is really a found poem from things that she said to me over the years. I taped her conversations. I got hours and hours and days of tape. So it was kind of fun to look in there and create poems out of what she had said. So here's the first one that I wrote. And one of the motifs that goes through the whole thing is she's always saying nothing happened, and yet something did happen, which I found out about after she died. When she told us nothing happened, we were fine with Enid's story. Why wouldn't we be? No mess, no fuss. Just blame it on her nervousness. They say she was a hothouse flower, a virgin to the wider world. Just an overreaction, we told ourselves. You know how excited she gets in a thunderstorm or on a busy highway. She, for her part, shrugs off the notion that the man did anything at all. She blames herself for the rest of it, her naivete. Yes, he took her to someplace she'd never been, she admits, a dark place. She can't really tell us where. It was new to her. There were rooms, beds, Coke highballs, a jukebox, a dance floor. We found convenient excuses for why, after that night, she felt compelled to wash her hands till the skin peeled away, till hand towels flopped into soggy piles on bathroom tiles. Why she insisted on using an elbow to open grocery store doors, lost weight by the dress sizes, down to the bone, never dated again, never married, never bore a child. I would be lying, she insists to her deathbed, if I said anything happened. And we were quick to believe the transparent lie that lay in wait for someone, anyone to dispute, dissect, hold her story up to the light of day and see through it. We made that lie our own, so convenient, so fitting a woman of her temperament. Nothing happened, hothouse flower, no one to blame but herself, standing over the sink, scrubbing clean hands. First time I heard it, I had just turned a woman myself, and I thought, she was raped, right? Right? Isn't it obvious? Am I wrong? Someone took advantage, someone violated, someone scared and hurt her when she was just a young, athletic, extroverted girl trying to get home on a rainy night. But no one echoed my concern, and I was afraid to push it. Over time, like her 3 sisters and her 5 brothers and her mother and all her friends and family and coworkers, psychiatrists, intake clerks and priests, like them, I accepted her insistent verdict. Nothing happened. An exaggerated response to a little flirting, simple to explain, but how to fathom what came later? Psych wards, electroshocks, brain surgery, talk therapy, lots and lots of hand washing, hand wringing, phobias, fears, tears. Still, for all of us, it was easier to look the other way than to imagine something happened. And then this very quick one that she it's her own poem. Remembering my lobotomy, and I'll just tell you that it had no negative effect on her. That's another story about the doctor who gave it to her, but she did have it. Remembering my lobotomy, 2 found poems. the night before. I was so scared. I thought I would die. This nurse, she was real nice. I smoked cigarettes then, and she said, you know, I get off at 11, but I'm going to stay because you are so afraid. I'm going to sit with you all night. And I said, do you think I could have a cigarette? She said, I'll have to go and ask. So she came back and she said, you can have one. And she lit it for me. She must have given me something because I don't remember anything more. I just remember that she held a match and lit that cigarette. The next day, they said the operation was at 7 in the morning and I didn't wake up till 4 the next afternoon. And what did I do as soon as I woke up? I said, I have to wash my hands. I remember saying it. I got to wash my hands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dianne. You're getting those claps, those virtual claps. So does anyone have any questions for Dianne? Miss Libby?
Yes. Hi, thank you, Dianne. That was, I really enjoyed those. I actually had a couple of questions. I admired the structure in your prose piece, posing
Yes.
those questions. It's almost like the journalist, you know, the who, what, why, where,
Yeah.
etc. But that really let us put the different layers together. So how did you come up with that structure?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I think for a long time, even before I was conscious of it, I was very interested in the whole idea of collage structure, where you put things, you know, in paper collage, you put things that are not connected together, and then somehow a connection is made and a new, something new is created. And so I felt that way with this. It's like I wanted to be inside my younger self. And I didn't want to have to make transitions all the time. And so I just put them separately as individual pieces. And then I put a little, you know, rough title over this, like what they told me, what I saw, that sort of thing. And I also wanted, as particularly in that piece, I wanted to get across that she was both things. She, you know, she was somebody who'd gone through a horrible assault and dealt with it her whole life, but she's also just a fun-loving, wonderful person to be around who functioned well. So it gave me that leeway.
Yeah, I think it also helps to lift up the fact that this is a piece about stories and the different stories and how they comment on each other, you know. So my second question is one I always ask when people do hybrid work, but how do you make your decision about the form of a piece, prose versus poem?
Yeah. Sometimes it's just trial and error. Sometimes I just know that I want to write something in prose, usually because I feel like I need to get more details in, not details, but chronology or something like that. But a lot of times, like for example, those found poems of hers, I tried to write those into the story just using her comments that I taped. But then I thought, no, I think I want it just to be purely in her voice, and it worked as a poem. So it works both ways. Sometimes you know, and sometimes I have to try.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
I think Seth. Yeah.
Thank you. So the term that you said about your Aunt Allie being described as a house flower really struck out to me personally. Like that was a bravery encouraged throughout the prose of the Wild Bear that you just read today. What I want to ask about that, is there really a direct, your own direct definition of that term that you would like to give, or otherwise were you intended to leave that out for interpretation for other readers to make their own sense of it based on your aunt's story that you described in that prose?
Yeah, well, I started using it first because that is literally what my uncle would say all the time. And they kind of pinned it on her, like, you know, she's so sensitive. She's been in a hothouse blooming, you know, and so you take her out in the world and she can't deal with it. And that was their way of like not dealing with what really happened, that it was a trauma. I looked the word up, and there are various definitions and connotations, I should say. But I kept it because I remembered it from being a little girl and hearing her called that, so it had a lot of emotional strength for me when I was writing it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
So here's the question that I ask all writers. You ready?
Okay. I don't
Why
know.
do you write? Well, it's why do you write? Sometimes people don't know, they just write.
No, I know. I mean, I think it's twofold for me. One is that I was a middle child between two boys, and keeping a diary, which I started doing when I was in second grade, just gave me some place where I could empty my thoughts without my brothers being around. But it seemed very safe and all. So that's how I got started. But I think I always wanted to understand things better, and through writing about them, I did. And I think that's why I became a journalist too. It's like I could ask questions that maybe weren't polite, that you wouldn't be able to ask somebody ordinarily, but because you're a reporter, you're supposed to do that, and that's your job. So you kind of have the license to ask people, well, why did this happen? What happened? Because I think I was growing up, particularly with my aunt, just always wondering, like, why did this happen? What does this mean? So I think it was just a way of dealing with my curiosity and my desire to understand things better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So please let everyone know, how can they connect with you?
You mean like on
Social media, website?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I have a website, but it's in terrible shape right now, so I wouldn't encourage anybody to go to it. But yeah, I think if you're on Facebook, or I'm on Instagram, those are ways. I teach at Spalding. I'm around.
All right. So if they want to connect, they know where to find you.
Yeah. Thank
you
you
so much. So we're coming along to our second reader of the night. And before we do that, I want to say quickly that you can always become a member of Louisville Literary Arts. You can go to www.louisvilleliteraryarts.org. Membership, there are different levels. You get a percentage off of the classes that we'll be having. If you're a member right now, you can actually go to our Writer's Block Festival for free if you're a current member. So I want everyone to know that. And we're going to move on to our second reader of the night. Now, Lisa, I want to make sure I'm saying your last name correctly. Is Dordal? All right.
Dordal, yeah.
Dordal, see?
Yes.
Dianne and I already had this type of conversation. Dordal.
Yes.
All right, I got it. So Lisa Dordal is a writer in residence in the Vanderbilt University English department and is the author of Mosaic of the Dark, which was the finalist for the 2019 Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry, Water Lessons, and Next Time You Come Home, which is forthcoming in 2023, all from Black Lawrence Press. She is a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee and the recipient of an Academy of American Poets Prize, the Robert Watson Poetry Prize, and the Betty Gabehart Poetry Prize. Her poetry has appeared in The Sun, Narrative, Image, The New Ohio Review, Best New Poets, Greensboro Review. Is it Rhino?
Yes.
Ninth Letter, and Calyx?
Yep.
All right. And she says that her website is lisadordal.com. So with that, take it away.
Thank you so much, Charlize. I really appreciate you inviting me here to speak. And thank you, of course, also to the Louisville Literary Arts Organization. I'm thrilled to be reading here with Dianne. Dianne, I was just riveted by your reading. I am also thrilled to be reading from my my brand new book, second full-length collection, Water Lessons, which came out in April of this year from Black Lawrence Press. And just to give people a little background about the book, there are a lot of poems in here about my mother's alcoholism and eventual death, and my father's dementia, and also my own childlessness. And then against the backdrop of these personal griefs, I look at, examine the patriarchal underpinning of the world I grew up in, and also my complicity in systemic racism as a white girl growing up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that's a little background of the book. I'm going to start with the very first poem in the book, which very appropriately is called Welcome. And I will finish with the last poem in the book, and I'll read a bunch in between. This first poem was, I wrote back in 2017 after coming back from the AWP conference, which some of you I'm sure know, but it's a huge writing conference that I go to every year. I love the conference, but I also find it a little bit overwhelming. And my strategy is to go to as many panels as I can during the day, and then I go back to my hotel room and just watch TV and veg out. So this particular hotel had one of those welcome channels where, you know, when you land on it, you hear about the amenities of the hotel. So as you will see, I got a little freaked out by the welcome channel. It was bringing up a lot of stuff for me. Welcome. Flipping the remote, I keep landing on the hotel's welcome channel. Hello, a woman says. White woman, pretty smile. May I have a minute of your time? Be as alert as you are at home, she says. Pretty woman, concerned for my safety. She keeps walking towards me there behind everything else, like fear behind the eyes. I keep flipping, taking in the news of the week. People are protesting in the streets. This pussy fights back. No ban, no wall. Never invite strangers into your room. Pretty smile, pretty woman, as pretty as my mother was when she was alive, pretty as she was in my dream. Be alert, the woman says, as alert as you are at home. I never knew on Tuesdays what she'd look like, my mother who drove to the Del Mar College of Hair Design to get dolled up cheap by a stranger. Sometimes large loopy curls, other times tight and small, tucked in like something sleeping. Use the viewport, the woman says, if someone knocks on your door. Hepburn chestnut 1 week to a sassy blonde the next. In the dream, she is reading from my book. She looks happy. Keep the doors and windows locked, the woman says. In 5 pages, my mother will be dead. First, the bottles hidden in bookcases throughout the house. Then the heart wing, locked, the woman says, at all times. My mother glances up. She is reading in the voice she used for Sounder and the Chronicles of Narnia. She reads as if the woman she is will not die, as if the woman who dies will not be her, as if she is not even there, like when she learned about my attempts, aspirin, then the knife, my hand like Abraham's over Isaac. Nice story, my mother said. We had learned to slip out of ourselves, to squeeze our consciousness through a hole the size of a dime. We were small inside our bodies. My body is sin, she told me once. Be alert, the woman says, as alert as you are at home. Nice story, she said. So this next poem is called Ars Poetica, which just means, for those of you who don't know, the art of poetry. And it's often a poem that explains a writer's obsessions. My mother is saying something I still can't hear, and I want to believe there is a door. Sometimes I dream I am being led through darkness, and I wouldn't call her death natural. So many rooms were closed off before we knew they were there, and I was the one no one believed. My father still insists her liver was fine. It was her heart, he says, just her heart. So my mother is one of my obsessions. I kind of think of it as a joyful obsession, because even though I write about, depressing things related to my mother, writing about her kind of, I feel like I experience her presence in this really comforting way. This poem is called Grief. There will be days when the word mother will burst out of you like the black smoke of a squid, a fire deep inside water. Anyone can become animal or a flicker of light. Remember, infinity means unfinished, and time doesn't move at the same speed for everyone. Remember, mother contains not just the sea, but the darkness of the sea, and there is no such thing as a half-life for grief. Even oceans contain waterfalls, and your mother is inside everything that you write, sometimes as melody, sometimes as mountain or bone. Every time you hear the word, you become something else. My mother is a peaceful ghost. In my dreams, my mother keeps walking out of the kitchen singing, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." She never sings past the first verse. Last night, I dreamed I was back at the house, every light on when I arrived. My mother, forgetting she was dead, smiled, said she was fine, everything was fine. At family gatherings, weddings, baptisms, my mother would look around sort of stunned and say, "There's so many of you," as if we'd arrived from someplace other than her own body, a country foreign to her. My mother is no longer flesh or breath. She's not a thing anymore. Is she with God? Some days I believe, some days I don't. Centuries ago in a church in Europe, someone carved "God help us" into a pew. Plague years. Sometimes my God is so big, I wonder what's the use? Divinity diluted into nothingness. My mother tried to stop drinking. I stopped, she told me once, like you'd stop a dryer or a washing machine. We were standing in the Black Waterfalls gift shop, looking at coffee mugs printed with maps. West Virginia on one side, waterfalls on the other. One mug had a gold star to mark the visitor center. "You are here," it said on a travel mug, "here and not here. How do you name what isn't here?" She tried to stop and didn't. So the inspiration for this next poem was from a story I heard, an interview I heard on NPR it was an interview about racism and white supremacy. And the person who was being interviewed is a Black scholar. I didn't catch his name. I just kind of popped in the middle of this interview while I was out doing errands. And at one point he mentioned, just sort of parenthetically, how racist the Pippi Longstocking books were. And Pippi Longstocking those books were, I grew up with, I loved those books. And at first I kind of recoiled, like, oh my gosh, don't take Pippi Longstocking away from me. But I realized, as this white person several years ago trying to really understand like what is going on, what has always been going on, I knew I had some responsibility to try to, understand this a little more. And so I went home, I got home from errands, and I still have a copy of a Pippi Longstocking book. And I sat down and I read it cover to cover, and I was horrified by what I read. And it got me thinking a lot about the power of narrative, the power of stories to just shape young minds and even, older minds in ways that we don't even notice. And I grew up in a fairly liberal family politically, and I knew about structural racism, but I had always assumed it was contained within a system or within a structure, like within a school system or within a hospital system or whatever it is. I didn't understand how pervasive racism is. So this is called primer. You're a white girl, cute in the eyes, reading your first chapter book. Maybe it's summer and you're sitting on the porch steps painted red every year by your mother. Maybe the sky is blue and the elm trees don't have Dutch elm disease, which means you haven't grieved yet for a tree. Maybe this is the day your father will set up the swimming pool with its thick plastic floor and round corrugated wall. Maybe soon you'll feel the pieces of dark mulch poking up from beneath the plastic. Maybe you loved the bumpiness of the pool floor because you knew how to float above it. It wasn't a big pool, but you were small. Your body fit everywhere. Under porches when you played 12 o'clock, the witch comes out, or inside the house, cupboards, sideboards. Maybe this is the day you're reading Pippi Longstocking, the year you loved Pippi best. Her house by the sea, her horse, her strength, the ease with which she traveled the world. Maybe you're already thinking about Halloween, painting your face with freckles, putting hangers in your hair to make your braids stick out. Maybe you didn't think anything about the barbarians in the Congo, didn't understand the part about Pippi's father being king of the Negroes. Maybe you saw the picture of Pippi with her face painted black and turned the page the way you turned any page. White girl inside the white imagination, the horse, the tiny house, the beautiful ocean, before you knew an ocean could be anything but beautiful. And this next poem is called Daughter Poem. Several years ago, actually 17 years ago, my wife and I were in the adoption process and we experienced a failed adoption and we never really got back into we never got back on the horse or whatever that expression is. So there's several poems, as I mentioned at the beginning, about childlessness. Sometimes I see her pressing her palms against a window pane in a house that is real, the way a house in a dream is real until you start to describe it and all you can say is, it was this house, only it wasn't. It's winter and she likes to feel the cold entering her body, or it's summer and it's heat she's after. She wasn't born, so she can't die. Sometimes there is a window, but no girl, and I am the one walking towards it. Sometimes I see her peering in, forehead against the screen of our back door, or running ahead of me on a path that is real, the way a path in a dream is real, saying, this way, this way. This poem is called The Last Time. The last time I saw my mother, she was sitting in the front passenger seat of my father's car. I looked down into her face through the open window. She looked up at me and smiled, said hello, her right hand resting on the door. She looked older than her age, but beautiful and luminous, something in her already beginning to change, a seed buried in the ground, sensing the sun's fuller light. She smiled, said hello, or maybe I was the seed, she the light. I'm here, she said, and here was someplace else. So just to switch gears a little bit, this is a poem about my father and his dementia. New bird. There's a new bird at the feeder. My stepmother notices its size, smaller, she says, than a vireo or chickadee. My sister sees white on the wing. I notice its beak, slender like a warbler's. I open Peterson's Field Guide to Birds, and then, because it's November, turn to confusing fall warblers. 4 entire pages as if confusion were its own species. My father is with us, eating cinnamon crunch. He's a child again, dementia changing his mind daily. He's sweeter now, milder than I've ever seen him. His own father died when he was 16, Thanksgiving Day, 1943. Sudden sickness of the heart, the paper said, above the outlook for feed supplies and cattle costs. The only time I've seen my father cry was during the sound of music, when Captain Von Trapp uses an army whistle to summon his children. My father and stepmother own 7 bird books, paperback, hardback, one signed by Peterson, another inscribed by my brother in 79. Dear Mom, Merry Christmas. My stepmother at 92 says, please take one. My father, also 92, says, buy your own book. His way of saying he's not dead yet. He doesn't know he has dementia. We watch TV together. He loves the commercials. In one, a turkey drives a golf cart, relaxes at the beach, reads a magazine. Gone cold turkey, the voice says, and the turkey does a dance, kicking its feet in the air. A drug has curbed the turkey's cravings for cigarettes. My father thinks the turkey is real. You can tell by the eyes, he says. During a commercial about Alzheimer's, he doesn't say a word. The bird at the feeder is real. We can tell by its hunger, its flight. My father keeps eating his cereal. My sister takes a picture of the bird, clicking as quickly as she can, but the bird is faster and the picture is a confusion of wings, a blur which could be its own thing. There's a story about God being bored. When God's companions suggest a game of hide and seek, they learn how good God is at hiding. My father is different now. Is he more himself or less? I like him this way. I like the bird at the feeder, its confusion of flight and hunger. I like the turkey driving a golf cart, kicking its feet up. My father was as afraid of his own father as I was of mine. I want to believe in love. I want to believe there is more love somewhere. And then, so I have 2 more poems to read. This poem is called The Life I Live, and there's a lot going on in this poem. It's kind of weaves together a lot of different narratives. So just in case it's easier to know some of this ahead of time, I make a reference to Joanna Macy, who is an environmental activist and Buddhist scholar, and also to George, the Hawaiian tree snail, who died on who died on New Year's Day in died on New Year's Day in 2019. And he was the last known member of his species. And again, just in case those, it makes it easier to know what's going on by having that information. The life I live. I could feel them looking up at me, imaginary customers in a lightly furnished room, as I scribbled orders on a small pad of paper. I was 9, bringing make-believe food to people in a hurry or on vacation. One I remember was grieving, another I could tell was in love. Sometimes I imagine myself at 90, somewhere north, forever cold, cradling a doll, my mind as demented as my father's is now. The doll's eyes opening and closing, making a soft clicking sound like an upturned beetle trying to right itself. My daughter, neither born nor conceived, splits my life in 2 directions. I like my life, who I've become and who I love. Still, my life bears a creek deep enough for swimming, children's shoes piling up by the back door. My sorrow is as real as I am. Sometimes I barely feel it, the way an animal hibernating in winter might be cut and barely bleed. Other times the daughter I never had cups her hands around fireflies, a glass jar on the grass beside her, and asks, why doesn't night stay in the jar? Joanna Macy says we must face our despair, look right at it, which is why I looked at George, Hawaiian tree snail, last of his kind, dead the first of the year. His death symbolic as it was real. When you give something a name, people pay attention, and everyone said he must have been lonely. Here's something I can't name, the peace I felt while looking at his photo, as if looking was a kind of love, not enough, but more than nothing at all. My daughter is a lovely fiction, and God, what shall I do with God? A priest held hostage for 3 years celebrated communion every day with his fellow prisoners. Body of Christ broken for you as he distributed the invisible bread. Blood of Christ shed for you, pretending to lift a chalice of wine. Everyone said what happened was real. My sorrow twists dolls out of willow, buries them in the shade of an old tree. My daughter presses her hands over my eyes. Now you see me, now you don't. The doll's eyes open and close. I'm happier than this poem says I am, and also sadder. Maybe this will be enough at 90, walking through snow, holding what isn't there until what isn't there calls my name. So I have one more poem to read. This one is called I Love. This is the very last poem in the book. I love how my wife says operators are standing by whenever I'm out of town and she wants to chat. I love that birds can see stars and that even fruit flies need sleep. I love that an African gray parrot learned how to use 100 words and that his last words were be good and I love you. I love how Jesus stopped a crowd of men from stoning a woman just by writing in the sand. I love that an octopus has 3 hearts. I love that Mother Teresa only heard from God one time and it was enough. I love that some birds mate for life and that after one dies, the survivor sings both parts of their song. I love that our brains are mostly water. I love that some people believe in heaven and some don't. I love that an owl visited my wife in a dream and that my wife said hello and asked, are you the kind of owl that people refer to as a barred owl? I love that what saves one person is not the same as what saves someone else. I love how the word cranium sounds like the name of a flower. I love that my mother keeps wanting to show me her garden. I love that the owl answered back. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your virtual claps. Does anybody have any questions of Lisa? Or even comments?
Yeah.
All right, Diane.
I have a comment more than a question. First of all, you stole the title to my book, Water Lessons.
Really?
Well, it's one of several.
Oh
that I
my
was looking at,
gosh. I just realized there's so much connection. Yes. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Several
Fascinating.
things.
Well, you can't copyright a title, so it's
Yeah, that's
yours.
true.
Yeah.
But I won't do that. I won't do that.
Well,
But I wanted to comment that what I really saw in so many of your poems and really loved was kind of your refusal to see anything as black and white, that
yes.
there's sort of an ambivalence, but also kind of a love of dichotomies and paradox, and it just seemed to be present in almost every poem. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And it's definitely kind of how I see the world. For one thing, is neither this nor that. It's all this mixture. And I feel like that's kind of one of the lessons in the book, referring back to water lessons, that, sometimes water is this beautiful natural element. Sometimes it is what people, are being carted across during the slave trade.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways in which, yeah, things are both good and bad. I mean,
Yeah.
life is complicated, and this world we live in is complicated, and the same thing can be beauty in one moment and torture in another. So yeah,
You really got that across well.
thank you. I'm glad.
I a poem that, I mean, a line that stuck out to me in the fifth poem was when you said about your mother, she wasn't born, but she can't die. Like that term alone really struck out to me. And like the way I interpreted from that same was like, even though this present mother is definitely present, it's like she's not, like I feel like she's not really there, but in a sense she is, in that a very like fond spirit and memory that you can completely see in that poem. Was that kind of image your intention for that poem?
Are you talking about the daughter poem?
Yeah, the daughter poem.
She wasn't born, so she can't die.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So she is, yeah, she's ever present, this imaginary daughter. And that is one of the reasons I write, actually. I mean, I started writing to just in high school to just deal with some pain I was feeling, but that was a long time ago. And one of the reasons writing gives me so much joy is I can go into these worlds, and imagine something that I didn't kind of literally experience, but it's up here. And in some ways, real, just as real. There's this famous quotation by Marianne Moore, the poet. Poetry is imaginary gardens with real toads in them. And that's kind of how I feel about this. Like, yes, I'm imagining this daughter that I never had, but it's so real in the poem. It just it becomes this reality.
It really does. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I calling on people?
Oh,
Irv,
Uh,
and then Livy.
I wanted to say I admire how you can deal with such dark issues, and yet, as you said, your writing brings you joy. I like that a lot about you as a person. I also
thank you.
wanted to just tell you that I thoroughly enjoyed the poem I Love, and as a country music fan, I'm wondering if you're aware of the country song I Love by Tom T. Hall.
Not at all.
Your poem is very reminiscent of his song.
I should look.
Yeah, I'm sure you could find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's called I Love, just like your poem.
Oh, that's great. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I don't even know who Tom T. Hall is.
Well, he
But
is what I think is one of the quintessential country music writers.
okay.
He could turn a phrase as well as anybody.
Well, I look forward to listening to that song. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Libby.
I'm always interested in craft, so I wondered if you would pick one of your poems and talk a little about how you revised it.
So that's a great question. I need to talk generally about a couple different ones, because it's different for different sort of types of poems. Like, for example, the first poem of the book, Welcome, this doesn't happen that often, but that kind of just came out of me fully formed. I wrote it on the plane coming back from DC. And I didn't have to do much revision. That was, every now and then the universe will just say, here, take this. But other poems, I'm trying to think if there's one in particular, but I have to, yeah, I do have to do revision. And one of my practices is to, which I think a lot of writers do, is to put it aside, when I have a draft, to put it aside. I used to have something I called a poetry oven, which was just a drawer in my desk, and I would put a poem in there for weeks or months, and then look at it again with fresh eyes, and that always helps. I pay a lot of attention to lines and line breaks. So one thing that if I'm stuck on that, sometimes what I will do is just write out my poems typically have sentences. Not all poems have sentences, but they typically have sentences. And I will write out every sentence just across the entire page, but with a line, blank space in between. And I make sure that the text is what I want it to say. And then I will kind of play around with the line breaks. And a lot of it is just kind of listening to myself as I'm reading it out loud, or looking for kind of just interesting line breaks that could bring out nuances. Yeah, I don't know if that, I tend to be really drawn to the couplet form. A lot of these poems are in couplets. And I think that speaks to this idea of, there's so much kind of two-ness in the book, but one theme of two-ness is really getting back at that idea of nuance and, joy and despair, not being kind of mixed up, and everything being rolled up into one. So I'm very drawn to the couplet form. I don't know if that helps, but yeah. Can I also just say, if anyone is interested, this is from Black Lawrence Press, and Black Lawrence Press, I'm pretty sure it's this whole month of September, is having a back to school sale. And all the books are, I don't know if that's half off, it might be 40% off, but if you want to support a small press, that's the way to go.
Also, how can people connect with you? You gave us your website. Are you on social media?
Yes, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm technically on Twitter and Instagram, but I just don't go there as often, but certainly people can follow me. I'm just not a very good tweeter or but people can send me a friend request on Facebook. That's fine. And I post on LinkedIn sometimes. And then, yeah, I have the website.
All right.
And my email is on the website, but if anyone, it's lisaaDordal@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. So now that I'm talking about social media, you can follow Louisville Literary Arts at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Lou Literary Arts, and connect with us there and see our upcoming announcements. But I do want to just say again, thank you to Dianne and Lisa, both of you all. You have really, my great aunt used to say all the time, she was so prim and proper, she would say, "You have acquitted yourselves well."
I like that.
And I would get so tickled with her, and I appreciated it as I got older. Just so you all know, again, the InKY is every second Thursday of the month. I would encourage you to fill out our forms. You can go to our website at www.louisvilleliteraryarts.org and find almost anything about us. We also have our meetup every third Wednesday in person. Irv facilitates that gathering at Barnes & Noble on Hurstbourne, right, Irv? Okay. And so that is back in person. So we are so grateful that we are able to provide some in-person programming. Also on September the 15th will be Give for Good. And so I hope that you all would support Louisville Literary Arts. We have a hefty goal. This time it's about $7,500, and you can give any amount. It's tax deductible. We are just trying to make sure that we can continue to provide programming. And as we're moving back into more in-person programming, we just want to make sure that we can fund the dream, right? For readers and writers. Also, I said you can become a member, any level of membership, and membership has its privileges, right? And we want to shout out our Writers Block Festival. Yay, we are back. After 3 years, we have not held the festival since 2019, and it will be held on November the 12th, 2022, over at Ivy Tech Community College, just across the bridge. You can go to our website and find out anything you need to know about all of our events. And that event, who our keynote speaker is Claudia Love Meyer from the Carnegie Center. And then you also have several people who are affiliated with different writing programs across Louisville and Lexington who will be doing workshops. So I hope that everyone will continue to, it says that someone said that I hope you continue doing some virtual events. Of course, we have to do both. We are in such a hybrid world now. We have to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So I do want you all to please register for the Writers Block Festival, and it's on Eventbrite. But again, you can go to our website. You can go any of our social media to find out information. We are trying to stay very, what's the word I want to use? Consistent with our posting. Because like Lisa said, every now and again, you know, you're better at one than you are the other. So I'm trying to make sure that we're posting on all of those sites as well. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. It was an awesome first InKY of the season. Thank you all so much for your wonderful work. And thank you for supporting LLA. We appreciate you all so much. So with that, I will say good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. It was wonderful.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks.